Okay, guys, now for obvious reasons, raising the retirement age, the early retirement age, is a terrible idea. It lowers the standard of living that Americans go by because if we extend the amount of time that they have to work to go ahead and take the earliest moment of retirement, that means they have to wait longer or, put another way, work more years to basically get to the next potential retirement age. In this instance, many presidents across the entire earth, right? All these different countries are looking at raising the retirement ages. Now, I try to keep the people who watch this channel well rounded, not just on American politics, not just on American Social Security benefits, but also on other nations and what's going on around this wonderful, wonderful earth. With that said, currently there is a big problem. And the big problem is that some of these governments are trying to push an agenda to transition retirement's early start point, of course, being in this country around 62 years old, and also in France being at 62 years old, to 64 years old. By doing this, it lets the government have 2 additional years in which they make the people wait longer to get the lowest potential amount of benefits. This is a terrible idea, but it is an idea that in France right now is potentially and likely to go ahead and pass through their congressional groups, through a presidential power. Now, we have certain restrictions on what President Biden can do when it comes to Social Security benefits and changing them. It obviously takes a lot more than just, your traditional presidential order. However, with that said, there are still ways that the president can use his powers to change Social Security in a meaningful way that would either benefit or harm you. What we're seeing in France right now is something extremely scary, and we need to look at it, we need to study it, and we need to figure out how this could be done to us in America. Let's go right over to the article. This is from NPR Europe, updated March 16th, 2023, 2:14 p.m. So this is just hours old. It's by the Associated Press. Here's the bottom line. Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron imposed a highly unpopular bill raising the retirement age from 62 to 64 on Thursday by shunning parliament and invoking a special constitutional power. It's a presidential power. Lawmakers were shouting, their voices shaking with emotion as Macron made the risky move, which is expected to trigger quick motions of no confidence. So in that country, they can do a motion of no confidence. What that means is that they're trying to go ahead and remove him as president. It's like a weird version of our impeachment system, but frankly, it's just we should have a version of that in America. We just don't. Okay. Riot police vans zoomed by outside the National Assembly, their sirens wailing. So to explain the level of incredibleness of what's going on with this is that it's massive. There are riots literally in France as a result of them raising the Social Security early retirement age from 62 to 64. The proposed pension changes, back to the article, have prompted major strikes and protests across the country since January. Macron, who made it the flagship of his second term, argued the reform is needed to keep the pension system from diving into deficit as France's population ages and life expectancy lengthens. Now, this is the same idea. And, remember, he tends to be a left-leaning politician as president of France. But this is the same idea that we're seeing right now from Republicans in America. They're all wrong. All those Republicans pushing that, the president of France that pushing that, are wrong. Americans should not have to work more, longer terms to be able to tap into their retirement, because all you're doing is lessening the amount of time that they have to get a check to enjoy their life. Because remember, even if somebody lives longer, you are significantly reducing the standard of living for that person because they have to be a slave to the workforce for more years. So here's the deal. Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne then tried to formally announce the decision at the National Assembly that, Macron was pushing through, where leftist members broke into the French national anthem to delay her speech. The speaker had to briefly suspend the session to restore order. Sound familiar to the 6th and what happened, things like that? Today, there's uncertainty about whether a majority would have voted for the bill. Borne acknowledged that. She knew that people didn't want it. They all knew people didn't want it. You're essentially telling people to shut up and suck down another 2 years of work. Borne acknowledged, but she said, we cannot gamble on the future of our pensions. That reform is necessary. What this shows us is that our government has failed, both America and France, to make sure that there's enough money in basically our trust funds. And also, it's failed to properly invest those funds because let's call it like it is. These special bonds that they put them into, they don't really make that much money. They're not good enough. We need something better. Warren prompted boos from the opposition when she said her government is accountable to the parliament, noting that the pension plan had been subject to 175 hours of parliamentary debate and that lawmakers can try to revoke the changes through no confidence motions, which, aren't usually successful. So, they're playing this game with presidential power, and they might actually finalize and get this thing through. There will actually be a proper vote, and this is a quote from Bourne, and therefore the parliamentary democracy will have the last say, Bourne said. Okay. Now, opposition lawmakers demanded the government step down, which they're never going to do in France, just like they wouldn't do in America. If they tried to raise it in America and we asked, President Biden's White House team to go ahead and step down, they just wouldn't. One communist lawmaker called the presidential power a political guillotine. Others called it a denial of democracy that signals Macron's lack of legitimacy. Similarly, in America, when we have essentially a presidential order or a presidential agreement that we disagree with, presidential orders where the president signs a declaration as to what we have to do on his behalf, of how we have to bend a knee and change our ways to what he wants. Whereas a presidential agreement is where he makes an agreement between another head of state with another country. But presidential order is where basically we have to do what he says, right? That's how that works. Opposition lawmakers demanded the government step down, which they're not going to use. One union leader called it institutional violence and called for more strikes and protests. Marine Le Pen said her far-right National Party rally party would file a no-confidence motion, and communist lawmaker Fabian Roussel said such a motion is ready on the left. So what's weird is that everybody can see it's incredibly unpopular to try and essentially change the entitlements that we paid to, and they've paid into all these years. It's a bad idea. If they can go ahead and superfund through essentially a stimulus during COVID, then they can superfund these Social Security trust funds. Now, remember, the Social Security Trust Fund would be fine for almost 75 years plus if we did one of those stimuluses just into the Social Security trust funds. It would fix most of these problems. But do you see how the government in America isn't willing to do that? And that's because the truth, and let's just be honest about it, if you essentially get people poor and you keep them poor, they will vote away more of their freedoms, they will vote away more of their opportunities, and they will just live to survive. If you guys look into essentially how your parents lived and their parents before that, they had a lot more freedom. They had a lot more money because the money would go a lot farther. But now you can barely afford to shop at Walmart. So things are just getting really bad. Now we have multiple banks that are failing. But we are in, of course, as it was stated by the White House, one of the greatest economies in the past 40 years, which, as we all know, is incorrect, but at the same time, very humorous. So the head of the Republican Party, Eric Ciotti, said his group won't add chaos to chaos by supporting a no-confidence motion, but some of his fellow conservatives at odds with the party's leadership could vote individually. A no-confidence motion needs approval by more than half the assembly, so they probably won't get it. In such case, which would be a first since 1962. Like I said, they probably won't get it. The government would have to resign in that instance. Macron could reappoint Warren if he chooses, and a new cabinet would be named. If no confidence motions don't succeed, the pension bill would be considered adopted, which means that officially in France, retirement age would go from 62 to 64 as the starting point, and 2 years would be taken off of people's lives in the sense of retirement, which will kill more people early because they will have to work 2 more years in their elderly years, which, by the way, when you work in your elderly years, significantly reduces the actual length of time that you have after you retire. Because when you work when you're older, it takes a much heavier toll on you. Earlier Thursday, the Senate adopted the bill in 193 to 114 vote, a tally that was largely expected since the conservative majority of the upper house favored the changes. Now, remember, that's similar to what we have in this country, which is the problem right now with the Republican Party. The Republican Party financially is just, miles ahead when it comes to getting the country back on track with being able to afford itself. Democrats are raise the debt limit. But the Republican Party likes to not do that through taxes. It likes to do that through cutting benefits. But people need every bit of the benefit they can get. In fact, a new article came out explaining how the current Republican leadership is intending for those who are retired to have to show incapacity to work further to receive food stamps when they're older, when they're in their elderly status. Kind of like everybody else. They would have to prove, just like younger people, that they were not with capacity to work in order to get their food stamps. This is some next level shit right here. This is some next level stuff right here. Okay. Now, continuing forward, uncollected garbage is piling up on the streets in Paris on Wednesday during an ongoing strike by sanitation workers. Opponents of French President Emmanuel Macron's pension plan are staging strikes and protests as the contested bill heads towards a vote. What's happening is that the government is starting to lead people, in my opinion, astray, and they're getting away with it in France. Macron's alliance lost its parliamentary majority last year, forcing the government to count on conservative lawmakers to pass the bill. The leftists and far-right lawmakers are strongly opposed, and conservatives are divided, making the outcome unpredictable. The French leader wants to raise the retirement age so workers put more money into the system, which the government says is on a course to run a deficit. Now, in America, our system already runs a deficit. It did as of 2020, 2021. We're already running that problem where we're not making enough money. We're in the red. And so as a result of that, as I've said in other videos, 2.8 workers to one recipient, the ratio doesn't work. The French leader wants to raise the retirement age so workers put more money into the system. The kicker with that is that it makes you work another 2 years, thereby reducing your life expectancy. Macron has promoted the pension changes essential to his vision, which is suicidal to any political career, but he's going for it. For making the French economy more competitive, the reform would raise the minimum pension age and require 43 years of work to earn a full pension amid other measures. So just to be clear here, at some point you have to sit back and realize that when they are able to define how many years of servitude you are under the lashes of essentially the whip, just to be able to get into this thing called essentially retirement, you're a slave. And people are slaves in, unfortunately, France as a result of it. And more Americans will likely fall into that same situation in the not too distant future if we don't make the politicians understand that they won't get away with this. Union leaders reacted with fury and determination to stage even more strikes a day after nearly 500,000 people in France protested against the bill. Francois Homerel of the CGC, representing energy workers, among others, said the government forces a vote when it is sure to win it and prevents the vote when they know they would lose. Across the river from the National Assembly, about 1,000 people rallied at the Place de la Concorde, where security forces backed by a water cannon appeared positioned to prevent them from reaching the nearby presidential palace. Leftist leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon told the crowd that Macron is gone over the heads of the will of the people. Members of Macron's French Unbowed Party were among the lawmakers singing the Marseillaise in an attempt to thwart the prime minister. So the bottom line here is this. Economic challenges have prompted widespread unrest across Western Europe, where many countries like France have had such low birth rates that young workers might not be able to sustain pensions for retirees. Now, that right there is the most important sentence in this entire article. What this article is saying is the ratio is a problem. We don't have enough people being born. And of those people being born, too many of them are disabled and retiring early. That's the bottom line. Like if you're like, oh, how could you say that? No, it's just the math. That's the bottom line. There's too many people that are being born and going on to a benefit check, and too many people are retiring early. And there's not enough people that basically are being born to work, which means we have a ratio problem just like France. We are at 2.8 to 1. I don't know what Francis is, but obviously France has the same problem. They don't have enough workers paying into the system for those who are taking benefits. Okay. Spain's leftist government joined with labor unions Wednesday to announce a historic deal to save its pension system. Spain's Social Security Minister, Jose Luis Escriva, said the French have a very different, unsustainable model and has not addressed its pension system for decades. Spain's workers already must stay on the job until at least 65 and won't be asked to work longer. Instead, their new deal increases employer contributions for higher wage earners. So, they're going after the people who make the big money, which is kind of what Biden's trying to do with this whole $400,000 and up situation. Benny Hill, thank you for the $9.99 donation. Love the little NES controller. Very cool. That's the Super NES controller with the glasses. Awesome. So, Bottom line is that I wanted to give you guys a heads up on a world view. Across the entire earth, and specifically in Europe, there's unrest about Social Security benefits. And Social Security benefits are going to define the future presidential election. We have not seen a solid or understandable plan on behalf of President Trump when it comes to Social Security benefits. He just doesn't have one yet, or he hasn't put it to paper, whatever. Bottom line is, we just don't have anything. President Biden made a lot of big promises pre-White House, 2 years in and a little bit, and we're still not really anywhere on this thing. He has released a budget. Most of that will not get passed. And the budget doesn't really address the retirement or disability issues that are facing this nation. They went into some of the details for Medicare, but they didn't address the biggies, which are, of course, retirement and, of course, disability benefits. So, as a result of all this, what I would say is be expecting this presidential election that's coming up to have riots over Social Security benefits. It's going to be one of the most talked about topics going into 2024 to 2025 because, 2024, everybody votes, 2025, new president takes office. As a result of that, I want you guys to be safe, be aware, and I want to ask you a question. Do you feel that you would be willing to raise the retirement age? Or would you like to hear more from politicians about keeping the retirement age where it is and potentially reducing or giving an option for people to take at 60 years old with an a larger reduced amount? Now, there's a trick to this thing, which is that if people reduce their retirement benefits to a small amount under the SSI benefits, then that person can swap around and just take SSI benefits or take a portion of SSI benefits to bolster their retirement benefits. I'll do a video on that to explain it so that people know how to basically maximize the retirement and or disability benefits as they go into that 60 plus arena of their life. I hope everybody is doing well. I will catch you a little bit later. I will see you at the next video. The next video is specifically about a fun video where a judge yelled at me today. I had 2 hearings. The judge basically got cranky with me. I'm going to explain to you my thoughts on it and then basically go through what you should do in those situations. I will catch you at the next video. Please remember, today is Thursday. Every Thursday for about, hour and a half of the 2 hours, I go live and I answer questions on this phone at 407-279-1754. It's usually between 8 and 10, but I'm starting late because of all the things that are going on right now. As a result of that, we're doing one more video and then I'm going live to answer questions. And every Thursday, of course, I answer questions for free and donate all that time. I'll catch you a little bit later and I'll catch you at the next video. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.